Just a night job? The CEO was shocked when a single dad solved what experts couldn't. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Before we begin today's incredible story, I'd like to ask for a small favor. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about courage, dignity, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss a new episode. It only takes a second, it's completely free, and your support helps us continue bringing meaningful and unforgettable stories to viewers around the world. We truly appreciate every single one of you. Before we continue, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Share your city or country in the comments below so we can welcome our amazing audience from across the globe. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's return to our main character and begin today's story. Most people think the smartest person in the room is the one wearing the expensive suit. But sometimes, the man everyone ignores is the only one who knows how to save everything. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the glowing headquarters of Whitmore Dynamics looked nothing like the confident technology giant the world admired during the day. The glass tower still shimmered against the Seattle skyline, but inside, confidence had given way to quiet panic. Red warning alerts flashed across giant monitoring screens. Engineers rushed from workstation to workstation with coffee cups in trembling hands. Phones rang without pause. Every passing second pushed the company closer to a disaster that could erase years of trust in a single night. The company had less than 20 minutes before millions of customer accounts would disconnect from its cloud platform, and every emergency solution proposed by the nation's top specialists had already failed. Voices overlapped in frustration. Someone suggested another system reboot. Someone else blamed a cyber attack. Another insisted the hardware itself had reached its limit. No one agreed, and no one had an answer. Standing at the center of the operations floor, Claire Whitmore remained remarkably calm despite the storm surrounding her. At 35, the CEO had earned a reputation for making impossible decisions under impossible pressure. Her tailored navy suit looked as composed as her expression, but behind her steady eyes was a realization she refused to speak aloud. If this system collapsed before sunrise, years of innovation, thousands of careers, and the confidence of every major client could disappear before the opening bell on Wall Street. She slowly looked around the room. Brilliant software architects, award-winning cybersecurity consultants, senior engineers flown in from 3 different states. Every expert she trusted had exhausted every theory. Yet the screens continued flashing crimson warnings across the walls. A heavy silence settled over the room, interrupted only by the endless hum of cooling fans inside the server racks. Then, from the far end of the hallway, came the faint sound of a rolling maintenance cart. Nobody paid attention. Why would they? It was only the night maintenance technician beginning another ordinary shift. Nathan Brooks pushed the cart with the same quiet patience he carried every evening. His blue work shirt was neatly pressed despite the long hours. A small family photo peeked from his shirt pocket, showing him smiling beside his 10-year-old daughter on a sunny afternoon at a county fair. He always kept that picture close because every overnight shift meant one more morning he could still walk her to school before going home to sleep. Most employees barely noticed him. Some nodded politely. Others walked past without ever learning his name. To them, Nathan was simply the dependable man who replaced light fixtures, repaired loose cables, and made sure the building stayed running while everyone else chased promotions. As he reached the operations floor, he slowed almost instinctively. He didn't stare at the executives. He didn't interrupt the frantic conversations. Instead, his eyes drifted quietly across the massive status displays, listening not only to the worried voices but also to the subtle rhythm of the building itself. The cooling system sounded slightly uneven. One cluster of server indicators blinked with a pattern that seemed strangely familiar. Nathan remained silent, watching for another moment, while across the room another engineer declared, with complete confidence, that there was nothing left to try. Nathan Brooks had learned long ago that the easiest way to disappear was to become predictable. Every weekday followed nearly the same rhythm. At 6 o'clock each evening, after helping his 10-year-old daughter Lily finish her homework, cooking dinner together, and listening to every story she wanted to tell about school, he would tuck her into bed at his sister's house across town before driving 42 minutes to Whitmore Dynamics for another overnight shift. By sunrise, While most employees hurried home exhausted from late meetings, Nathan would already be waiting outside Lily's elementary school with a warm breakfast sandwich and a smile that never seemed forced. Sleep came later. Fatherhood always came first. Inside the company, however, few people knew anything about the quiet man pushing the maintenance cart. His employee file listed him as facilities maintenance technician, night operations. Hired 7 years earlier. Excellent attendance. No disciplinary actions. No college degree listed. No one questioned it because no one imagined there was anything worth questioning. He fixed broken lights before anyone noticed they had burned out. He repaired loose ceiling panels without interrupting meetings. He quietly organized storage rooms that everyone else ignored. He left every place a little better than he found it and never expected anyone to notice. Nathan preferred it that way. Attention had once been a permanent part of his life, and he had discovered that peace often lived where recognition did not. Across the operations center, another wave of anxious conversations swept through the room. One consultant pointed toward a digital architecture diagram covering an entire wall. Another insisted they should isolate half the network before the remaining systems collapsed. A younger engineer nervously refreshed performance graphs every few seconds, hoping a miracle would somehow appear on the screen. Claire Whitmore listened carefully to each recommendation, but every explanation felt incomplete. Brilliant minds filled the room, yet every solution sounded more desperate than the last. Nathan quietly replaced a burned-out light panel near the back of the operations floor. Standing on a short ladder, he could hear nearly every conversation without trying. Years of working overnight had taught him something unusual. Buildings had personalities. Machines developed habits. Air conditioning units, electrical systems, backup generators, and servers all communicated in subtle ways long before alarms ever appeared. Most people watch monitors. Nathan listened to everything else. He climbed down from the ladder and paused beside a ventilation grate. The steady flow of cool air felt weaker than it should have been. Somewhere beyond the walls, one group of server fans accelerated while another suddenly slowed. It lasted only a second before returning to normal, but the pattern lingered in his thoughts. It reminded him of an orchestra where only one instrument had drifted slightly out of tune. Nobody else appeared to notice. A senior consultant rubbed his temples before speaking with visible frustration. We have tested every software scenario. The numbers do not make sense. Another engineer sighed heavily. Then maybe the hardware is failing everywhere at once. Nathan glanced quietly toward the enormous system map glowing across the wall. His expression did not change, but something behind his calm eyes sharpened. The blinking sequence was not random. Neither was the timing between each warning. He folded the clean cloth he had been carrying, placed it carefully onto his maintenance cart, and looked once more toward the anxious executives. For the first time that night, he was no longer watching the crisis unfold. He believed he understood where it had actually begun. The digital countdown above the operations dashboard changed from 19 minutes to 18. Nobody announced it, but everyone saw it. The room grew noticeably quieter as reality settled over every conversation. A contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars depended on the cloud platform remaining online before financial markets opened on the East Coast. If the system failed, hospitals, logistics companies, manufacturers, and thousands of small businesses that depended on Whitmore Dynamics would wake up to frozen operations. Claire Whitmore folded her arms and looked toward the lead engineering team. "Tell me what we have not tried," she said calmly. The question lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. Finally, one senior architect answered with visible exhaustion. "Everything that follows established protocol." Another consultant added, "We have replaced virtual clusters, restored backups, isolated the database, and verified external traffic. Nothing explains why the failures keep moving." A younger engineer stared at another screen and quietly muttered, "It is almost like the system is responding to us." Nobody answered him. The idea sounded ridiculous. Across the room, Nathan Brooks slowly rolled his maintenance cart toward a utility closet beside the server corridor. His assignment for the evening included replacing 2 air filters and inspecting emergency lighting. He performed each task with the same steady rhythm that had defined his work for years. Yet his attention never truly left the operations center. Every few seconds, another alert echoed through the building. Every alert arrived almost exactly 37 seconds after the previous one. Nathan noticed the interval immediately. Patterns always mattered. Random failures rarely behaved so politely. As he opened the maintenance panel near the ventilation controls, another subtle clue appeared. One cooling unit cycled on and off with perfect consistency, while another remained under unusually light demand despite carrying nearly identical equipment. Nathan rested one hand against the metal housing. It felt cooler than expected. He closed his eyes for only a brief moment, listening to the layered hum flowing through the walls. Most people heard noise. Nathan heard timing. He quietly walked back toward the operations floor, carrying a replacement filter beneath one arm. Nobody stopped him because nobody considered him part of the emergency. Two software specialists hurried past, discussing corrupted memory allocation. Another executive was already calling outside consultants in California. A security analyst insisted the incident had to be an advanced cyber attack because nothing else made sense. Nathan looked once toward the giant architecture diagram stretching across the wall. His eyes followed several highlighted pathways before settling on one forgotten support cluster tucked into the corner of the display. It had received almost no attention during the frantic discussions. Yet every warning appeared to ripple outward from that exact location. He watched another engineer confidently disable an unrelated service. Seconds later, 3 additional warning lights appeared. Nathan quietly exhaled. They were treating the symptoms instead of the source. Claire stepped away from another conference call and removed her glasses for a moment, pressing her fingers gently against the bridge of her nose. She looked around the room, searching not for confidence, but for honesty. "Does anyone actually know what is happening?" she asked. Silence answered first. Then uncertain glances traveled between experts who only minutes earlier had spoken with complete authority. Nathan looked toward the nearest monitor one final time. The blinking sequence repeated exactly as he expected. The rhythm confirmed what he had suspected from the beginning. He gently set the clean air filter onto his cart, took one measured breath, and started walking toward the circle of executives, knowing that the next few words he spoke might either end the embarrassment of an entire room or make him the easiest person in the building to laugh at. Nathan stopped a respectful distance from the circle of executives and engineers. He did not raise his voice, interrupt anyone, or pretend to belong in the discussion. He simply waited until one conversation ended naturally before speaking. "I think everyone is looking in the wrong place," he said quietly. For a brief moment, the room fell silent, not because they agreed with him, but because they were surprised a maintenance technician had spoken at all. Then a few uncomfortable smiles appeared. One consultant chuckled under his breath. Another engineer shook his head without even looking up from his laptop. A department manager crossed his arms and frowned. "Nathan, is it?" he asked. "This is not the time. We are dealing with a critical systems failure." Nathan nodded politely. "I understand. That is exactly why I thought I should say something." The manager sighed impatiently. "Facilities does not troubleshoot enterprise architecture. Please get back to your work." Nathan did not argue. He simply looked once more toward the wall of status displays before answering. "I am not saying the software team is wrong. I just think the system is telling you something different." Another consultant laughed more openly this time. "The system is telling us it is failing." A few people smiled nervously, grateful for even a moment of relief from the pressure. Nathan accepted the reaction without embarrassment. Years earlier, comments like those might have bothered him. Now they passed over him like rain across a window. Claire Whitmore watched the exchange from several feet away. Unlike the others, she noticed something unusual. Nathan had not spoken with the uncertainty of someone guessing. He had spoken with the calm confidence of someone who had already reached a conclusion. There was no arrogance in his expression, no desire to impress anyone, only quiet conviction. She stepped closer. "What exactly do you think we are missing?" she asked. Several engineers exchanged surprised glances. One of the senior architects leaned toward Claire and lowered his voice. "With respect, we should stay focused on qualified personnel." Claire kept her eyes on Nathan. "I asked him a question." Nathan took a slow breath before answering. "Every alert is arriving at nearly identical intervals. The failures are moving in a predictable sequence instead of spreading randomly. That usually means the original trigger is still active." One consultant immediately objected. "We already ruled that out." Nathan nodded. "Did anyone examine the support cluster in the Northeast server group before shutting down the secondary services?" The room became noticeably quieter. A younger engineer quickly opened another system map and searched the highlighted cluster. His forehead tightened. I do not think anyone did. The senior architect responded almost immediately. Because there was no reason to. That cluster has shown minimal activity all night. Nathan looked at the blinking diagram again. Exactly. The single word carried no challenge, only quiet certainty. Claire noticed that while everyone else was defending previous decisions, Nathan was simply observing the evidence. She looked around the room before making a decision that surprised even herself. Give him 5 minutes, she said. Several voices protested at once. Claire, we cannot waste valuable time. This is not standard procedure. We have less than 15 minutes. Claire raised one hand, and the room fell silent again. Her voice remained steady. We have followed standard procedure for over an hour. It has not solved anything. 5 minutes will not change that unless he is right. Every pair of eyes slowly turned toward Nathan Brooks. The maintenance technician stood quietly beside his cleaning cart, looking completely ordinary. Yet for reasons no one in the room could explain, the atmosphere had changed. For the first time that night, the person with the least impressive job title had everyone's full attention. Nathan walked toward the nearest workstation without the slightest trace of urgency. The countdown clock continued moving, but he refused to let panic dictate his thinking. Calm had always been his greatest advantage. A young engineer hesitated before sliding his chair aside. Nathan thanked him with a polite smile and studied the architecture map for only a few seconds before opening a different monitoring window that had remained untouched throughout the night. Several consultants exchanged skeptical looks. One whispered, "What is he doing?" Another quietly answered, "I have no idea." Nathan ignored the conversation behind him. His attention remained fixed on a narrow stream of diagnostic data scrolling steadily across the screen. He enlarged one graph, compared it with another, then asked a simple question. Has anyone verified whether the Northeast Support Cluster is still handing out synchronization requests? The room remained silent. Finally, the younger engineer who had spoken earlier admitted, "We assumed it stopped after the first recovery cycle." Nathan nodded gently. Assumptions can become expensive. He pointed toward a sequence of tiny timing spikes that most people had overlooked because they appeared insignificant compared to the larger system failures. This cluster never actually stopped. It keeps telling every restored service to reconnect to a damaged synchronization path. Every repair you complete is immediately undone because the original instruction is still being repeated. One senior consultant frowned. That should not even be possible. Nathan answered without looking away from the screen. It should not. But it is. Claire stepped closer. Can you prove it? Nathan clicked through several monitoring windows before displaying a hidden diagnostic timeline. Every 37 seconds, a nearly invisible synchronization request appeared from the same neglected support cluster. The younger engineer stared at the graph with widening eyes. That matches every warning interval. Another engineer quickly overlaid the alert history onto Nathan's timeline. The two patterns aligned almost perfectly. Quiet disbelief spread through the room. Nathan finally turned toward Claire. Do not restart the entire system again. That will only repeat the cycle. He pointed toward the isolated cluster. Temporarily disconnect this synchronization service. Clear its outdated routing table. Then restart only this cluster before reconnecting it to the network. The senior architect hesitated. That procedure is not in the recovery manual. Nathan gave a small smile. Because the recovery manual assumes this cluster is never forgotten during maintenance. Claire looked from the screen to her engineering team. No one objected this time. The evidence was too clear. Do it, she said firmly. Fingers immediately moved across keyboards. Commands were entered exactly as Nathan described. One by one, confirmation messages appeared. The isolated cluster shut down. The outdated routing table cleared successfully. Seconds later, the synchronization service restarted with fresh configuration data. Every eye in the room fixed itself on the enormous status wall. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. 15. No new alerts appeared. The red warning lights that had dominated the screens all night slowly disappeared one after another until the displays glowed almost entirely green. Performance graphs stabilized. Network traffic normalized. Customer connections recovered across every region. The endless warning alarms finally stopped, replaced by a silence so complete that even the steady hum of the servers sounded almost peaceful. Nobody cheered. Nobody spoke. The experts simply stared at the screens, then at Nathan Brooks. The maintenance technician quietly stepped away from the workstation, folded his hands in front of him, and waited as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Claire looked at the restored system, then back at the quiet father standing beside his maintenance cart. In that unforgettable moment, she realized the least celebrated employee in her company had just solved the one problem none of her brightest experts had been able to understand. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The operations center, which had been filled with overlapping voices only moments earlier, became almost impossibly still. The only sounds remaining were the soft hum of the cooling systems and the gentle tapping of status updates appearing across the giant display wall. Every critical service now showed healthy operation. Every performance graph climbed back into its normal range. One by one, confirmation messages arrived from regional data centers across the country. Customer connections had stabilized. Automatic monitoring systems reported full recovery. The crisis was over. Claire Whitmore slowly exhaled a breath she had not realized she had been holding. Around her, engineers stared at their monitors as though they expected the warnings to return at any second. They did not. The younger engineer who had followed Nathan's instructions refreshed the system dashboard 3 separate times before quietly whispering, "It is really fixed." Another specialist independently reviewed the synchronization logs, searching for any overlooked anomaly. After several silent minutes, he leaned back in his chair and simply nodded. Everything checks out. A consultant who had spent the last hour defending increasingly complicated recovery plans removed his glasses and looked directly at Nathan. "How did you recognize it so quickly?" Nathan answered with the same calm expression he had worn throughout the night. "The timing was too consistent. Machines usually leave clues if you stop trying to force them to speak louder than they already are." Several people exchanged uncertain glances. It sounded almost too simple. Claire stepped closer. "You noticed the interval before anyone else." Nathan gave a small shrug. "Patterns are easier to hear when you are not searching for the most complicated explanation." One engineer frowned thoughtfully. "You listened to the cooling systems." Nathan smiled politely. "The servers, the airflow, the synchronization requests, and the alert sequence were all telling the same story. They just were not speaking the same language." The room fell quiet once again. Nobody laughed this time. Instead, several experienced engineers reopened their diagnostic windows, retracing every observation Nathan had described. Each step led to the same unavoidable conclusion. His explanation was correct from beginning to end. Claire studied him carefully. There was something almost unsettling about his humility. He had not celebrated. He had not criticized anyone. He had not even mentioned that others had dismissed him only minutes earlier. Instead, he quietly closed the diagnostic windows, thanked the young engineer for sharing the workstation, and picked up the clean maintenance cloth he had left beside his cart. It was as though restoring a billion-dollar technology platform had simply interrupted the work he had originally come to do. One consultant finally broke the silence. "Where did you learn to think like this?" Nathan paused before answering. His eyes drifted briefly toward the family photograph still tucked inside his shirt pocket. "Life teaches different lessons to different people," he said softly. "Sometimes the best thing you can do is slow down long enough to notice what everyone else is rushing past." His answer raised more questions than it resolved. Claire noticed it immediately. This was not luck. This was not instinct alone. It was the confidence of someone who understood complex systems at a level far beyond ordinary experience. She glanced toward the human resources director, who had quietly entered the operations center after hearing the crisis had ended. "Bring me Nathan Brooks's employment file," she said in a calm voice. The complete file. Nathan heard the request, but showed no visible reaction. He simply picked up a replacement light fixture, turned toward the hallway, and resumed the overnight maintenance schedule that had been interrupted less than 15 minutes earlier. As he disappeared beneath the quiet glow of the corridor lights, nearly every engineer in the room continued watching him walk away, each of them asking the same silent question. Who exactly had they been working beside all these years without ever truly seeing him? The first light of dawn slowly spread across the Seattle skyline, washing the glass walls of Whitmore Dynamics with soft shades of gold. Most of the engineers remained inside the operations center, still reviewing system reports that now showed perfect stability. Yet Claire Whitmore's attention had shifted away from the monitors. A slim personnel folder rested on the conference table in front of her. It looked ordinary, almost disappointingly simple. She opened it expecting to find a routine employment history. Instead, she found almost nothing. 7 years employed as a night maintenance technician. Outstanding attendance. Exceptional performance reviews. No disciplinary actions. No listed engineering certifications. No explanation of previous employment beyond a short gap marked personal leave. Claire frowned. This cannot be the complete file, she said. The human resources director looked equally puzzled. It is everything we have. He applied through a local hiring program after requesting an entry-level position. His references were excellent, but he specifically declined management opportunities over the years. Claire looked up. He declined promotions? Every single one, the director replied. He always said the overnight schedule allowed him to be there for his daughter during the day. The room grew quiet again. One senior engineer shook his head slowly. Someone with his technical instincts would normally lead entire departments. Claire closed the folder, but something continued bothering her. Nathan had recognized a flaw hidden beneath layers of software, infrastructure, and timing with almost effortless precision. Skills like that were not developed by replacing light fixtures. She turned toward the information security manager. Search archived company records. Expand the search beyond employment files. Look for patents, consulting contracts, engineering conferences, anything connected to his name. The manager nodded and began typing. Several minutes passed before a quiet voice broke the silence. I found something. Every eye turned toward his monitor. An old engineering journal appeared on the screen, dated 15 years earlier. Beneath the headline was a photograph of a much younger Nathan Brooks standing beside a group of software architects. Claire stepped closer. Read it. The manager adjusted the document and began. Nathan Brooks receives national recognition for designing an adaptive synchronization framework capable of maintaining enterprise cloud stability during distributed system failures. Another engineer leaned closer in disbelief. Adaptive synchronization? The manager continued searching. More articles appeared. Invitations to national technology conferences. Interviews discussing advanced network resilience. A patent connected to distributed server architecture. Then another document appeared that made the room completely silent. It was an archived technical white paper describing the original synchronization principles used years earlier as the foundation for Whitmore Dynamics' first enterprise platform. At the bottom of the first page, listed among the principal architects, was Nathan Brooks. Claire stared at the screen without speaking. She slowly remembered a conversation from years before she became chief executive officer, when senior executives had praised a groundbreaking system that had helped launch the company's rapid expansion. She had never learned the names behind its design. One engineer whispered almost to himself, he did not just understand the system, he helped create the way it thinks. Nobody answered because there was nothing left to argue. The maintenance technician they had overlooked for 7 years had quietly walked past the very technology that still carried his fingerprints every single night. Claire looked toward the hallway where Nathan had disappeared earlier with his maintenance cart. She realized that while everyone else had spent years chasing titles, promotions, and recognition, the man who had already earned all of those things had willingly exchanged them for something he considered far more valuable. Somewhere across the city, before most people had even poured their first cup of coffee, Nathan Brooks would soon be walking his daughter into school, and not one child or parent waiting outside would ever guess they had just passed one of the most brilliant engineers in the company's history. Claire Whitmore did not wait until the next board meeting or schedule an appointment through an assistant. That afternoon, after only a few hours of restless sleep, she drove herself across Seattle with nothing more than the address listed in Nathan Brooks's employee file. She expected to find a large house hidden behind quiet success, or perhaps a private office where he continued consulting in secret. Instead, her navigation led her to a modest neighborhood lined with maple trees, bicycles resting on front lawns, and children laughing as they raced home from school. Nathan's small white house was neat but simple. The porch had fresh paint, colorful flower pots, and a handmade bird feeder hanging beside the front steps. There were no expensive cars in the driveway, no signs of wealth, and nothing that suggested one of the architects behind a billion-dollar technology platform lived there. Before Claire could walk to the front door, she paused. Across the yard, Nathan was kneeling beside a raised garden bed, while Lily carefully planted young tomato seedlings. "Not too deep," Nathan said with a warm smile. "Roots need room to breathe before they learn to grow." Lily laughed after accidentally dropping too much soil into one hole. Nathan simply smiled and helped her fix it without a trace of frustration. A few moments later, they carried a small watering can together, taking turns so neither one had to hold all the weight. Claire remained quietly near the sidewalk, watching a side of Nathan that no employment record could ever describe. There was no pressure in his voice, no rush, no need to prove anything. Every word he spoke seemed designed to build confidence rather than demand perfection. After they finished in the garden, Nathan noticed an elderly neighbor struggling to carry several grocery bags from her car. Without hesitation, he walked over, greeted her by name, and carried every bag to her front porch. The woman thanked him with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had received this kindness many times before. Nathan simply wished her a pleasant afternoon before returning home. Only then did he notice Claire standing near the gate. For just an instant, surprise crossed his face before giving way to his usual calm expression. "Ms. Whitmore," he said politely. "I was not expecting company." Claire smiled gently. "Neither was I, if I am being honest." Lily looked curiously at the visitor. Nathan introduced them with quiet pride. "This is my daughter, Lily." Claire knelt slightly, so she could speak at Lily's eye level. "Your father helped a lot of people last night." Lily beamed without the slightest surprise. "He helps people all the time." Nathan gave a soft, almost embarrassed smile while changing the subject. "Would you like some lemonade?" "Lily insists ours tastes better than anything from the grocery store." A few minutes later, the three of them sat on the small front porch with simple glasses of homemade lemonade. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers through the neighborhood. Claire looked around once more. The furniture was modest. The paint showed signs of careful repair. Every detail reflected effort instead of luxury. She finally understood why Nathan had turned down every promotion. He had never been running away from success. He had been running towards something far more important. As Lily leaned comfortably against her father while telling an enthusiastic story about her science project, Claire quietly realized that the greatest achievement she had witnessed was not the impossible system recovery inside the company. It was the extraordinary life Nathan Brooks had built after deciding that the most valuable title he would ever hold was simply Dad. Nearly 1 year passed, and the story of the mysterious overnight recovery slowly became part of company legend. New engineers heard different versions of what had happened, but every version ended the same way. A quiet maintenance technician had seen what everyone else had missed. The details became easier to tell than to understand because the truth was never really about technology. It was about perspective. During that year, Claire Whitmore made a decision that surprised the entire executive board. Nathan Brooks was offered a senior engineering position with complete authority to redesign the company's infrastructure. The salary was generous. The office overlooked the Seattle skyline. Every benefit imaginable was included. Nathan listened carefully without interrupting. When Claire finished, he smiled with sincere gratitude before asking only one question. "Would I still be able to take my daughter to school every morning and be there when classes end?" Claire hesitated. The executive schedule required long meetings, constant travel, and unpredictable hours. She answered honestly, "Not every day." Nathan gently folded the written offer and returned it across the table. "Then I cannot accept it as it is." The room became perfectly still. No one had ever declined an opportunity like that. Claire looked at him with genuine curiosity rather than disappointment. "You would walk away from this?" Nathan nodded. "Years ago, I chased every promotion because I believed success meant being indispensable at work. Then life reminded me that my daughter only gets one childhood. Servers can always be repaired. Lost afternoons cannot." His words lingered in the conference room long after the conversation ended. A week later, Claire called another executive meeting. This time she presented a different proposal. Nathan would become the company's senior systems architect with a schedule built around his responsibilities as a father. Meetings would take place during hours that respected family commitments whenever possible. Remote work would be available whenever practical. More importantly, The same flexible policy would gradually become available to every employee whose performance earned that trust. Some executives questioned the change. Claire answered with quiet confidence. If we only reward people for sacrificing their families, then we misunderstand success. Nathan accepted the revised offer with a grateful smile. His office remained surprisingly simple. One bookshelf, one family photograph, no unnecessary decorations. Engineers visited throughout the day, not because they were required to, but because they knew they would leave every conversation wiser than when they entered. Nathan never reminded anyone of the night he had saved the company. He asked thoughtful questions, listened carefully, and gave credit to others whenever possible. His greatest talent was not solving impossible problems. It was helping other people believe they could solve them too. Every afternoon, no matter how demanding the day had become, he quietly packed his bag before the school dismissal bell. New employees occasionally looked surprised to see such an important engineer leaving while others remained at their desks. Veteran employees would simply smile and say, "He has another job that matters even more." One spring afternoon, Claire happened to look through the conference room window just as Nathan walked across the parking lot. Lily ran toward him with the excitement only a child could bring, and he welcomed her with the same warm smile that had never changed. Claire watched them disappear together beneath the tall maple trees lining the sidewalk. She realized the greatest leader she had ever met had never demanded attention, never defended his reputation, and never measured his worth by his title. His quiet dignity had earned something far greater than admiration. It had transformed the way an entire company understood success, proving that the strongest people are often the ones who choose kindness over pride, family over recognition, and grace over applause.